edition of Sessa's Corner. And tonight, I have the privilege and the honor of being in hallowed ground. And I tell you, for the first time, we're making history tonight with Sessa's Corner because this week, we are going back to back and belly to belly. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored and privileged to have with me tonight as my guest, my dear friend, legendary Belleville native, and of course, legendary Major League Baseball umpire, the one and only Mr. Phil Cuzzi. And as you can see, you're specifically on the grounds of our legendary Belleville High School varsity baseball field, and more importantly, the George Zanfini Municipal Baseball Field, in remembrance of our dear friend George, aka and affectionately known as Z. Of course, your former, coach and dear friend, and a former teacher of mine, and of course, I spent many years up in the press box announcing the football games with George as my sidekick, my right-hand tag team partner, him doing the clock, me doing the announcing, and it was, great memories. And I can't believe, I was just thinking about this the other day, Phil, 5 years this summer already that he passed, and I think it was August, right? If I'm not mistaken, this August would be officially 5 years.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the way I got the news was I was working in, I believe it was Chicago, and I came in the locker room, and I checked my phone, and I had a message from my wife, Gilda. Now, Gilda never calls me after the game because she usually goes to bed early. And then I had a message from Alan Frank and Joe Ross as well. And I got the news about George. And the interesting thing was that they were all supposed to come to Pittsburgh the next series.
Yep.
And it just didn't happen. Instead of them coming to Pittsburgh, we went to George's funeral.
One of the saddest times, and I was just devastated. And and then of course I saw you at the, we were all at the funeral together, and he is so deeply missed. We can't say enough about it. That being up in that press box these past 5 years, it hasn't been the same without him. Speaking of George, since we're on the subject, what classic George Zanfini story comes to mind? I know you probably have some.
Yeah, well, funny that you say that you worked the clock, you announced the football games, and George did the clock. I worked with George for a lot of years at Mark Curry, my classmate from Fighting 73's, head basketball coach at Caldwell College.
That's right.
George did the clock, and I did the shot clock. And you talk about having fun and having stories, and we had a routine because he would pick me up. And as you know, he was always early. So if he told you he was going to pick you up at 6 o'clock, he was at your door at 5:30, 20 to 6. And we drove up to Caldwell College, now Caldwell University, and we always had dinner before the game. And then we would always stop for coffee, and he would always bring the nuns up at Caldwell coffee before the game. And that was a fun time because, but really, a lot of people don't know. The first time I went to umpire school, George loaned me the money to go to umpire school. And it was, he said, don't worry about, paying me back. But of course I paid him back. And he said, just give me whatever you can. Don't worry about it. And I remember not far from here, his history class, his history room.
Yep.
And I drove, because when I finally had all the money, after it was over, I knocked on his window and I handed him the money through the window. And, he said, if you need it, hang on to it. I said, no, I appreciate it. And, and that was it. But, yeah, we miss him.
Oh, we absolutely miss him terribly. But that's how George was. He had a heart of gold. And, again, he is deeply, deeply missed. But, again, he lives on in our hearts forever and always will. Always will. I remember when he worked there, he would work there part-time at night. And my father would go there religiously. You remember my dad, of course.
Sure.
A lot of times you would be hanging out in the store at night too.
I was always there.
And my father would go and play his pickets. And I think one night it should have been $8, and George said, "No, it's not." First he said $9. My father said, "No, George, I'm telling you, it's $8."
I'm sure your father Duke knew because he played it every night. He knew exactly what he was getting.
Exactly.
And, yeah.
George did it. George counted it up again. He came up with $9 again. And then my father said, no, I'm sorry, George, I'm telling you, it's got to be $8. And then George says, let me do it again. So a minute goes by, he does it again. He says, no, Duke, it's $6.50. And my father's like, $6.50, it's got to be $8. Eventually, George just said, give me the $8. That's one of many stories, and we can talk all night about George. George, what can we say? We love you, we miss you, and you gave us so many wonderful memories. So we're going to talk about you now. Speaking of the current state of affairs and the impending 60-game shortened season and everything, your thoughts and expectations on what they're trying to do and what do you foresee?
Well, Major League Baseball is certainly hoping that we are going to be able to play, and it will be a shortened season. They're talking about 60 games, and then have an extended postseason. And I think the country is dying for baseball, and baseball has always been like a healing factor. And we think about 9/11, and I think this will serve as the same ingredient for that. And I think as anxious as we are to get back on the field, and the players are anxious to get back. This is today's July 1st, and I'm not used to being home July 1st. And unless I, had a vacation or off, but and my wife Gilda is certainly not used to me being around the house as often as I have been the last 3 months.
I hope that's been a good thing.
Well, you'd have to ask her, but we've gotten a lot of things done around the house, which has been good. But I think everyone's itching to get back, and we hope that it happens. I mean, it's scheduled to happen. And spring training is going to look completely different. They're calling it spring training 2.
That's right,
because we've already worked.
We started, yes.
We started
before we were stopped. Everybody was stopped dead in their tracks.
Yeah. I think I worked out of a 20-game schedule for spring training. I think I worked, I don't know if it was 16 or 17 games. So, but it's going to look a lot different. The spring training is scheduled to be in the home team's home site. So it means Yankee Stadium will have their, their camp, and the Mets and every team. I think the question mark is Blue Jays in Toronto, because I'm not sure that people can go up there and then be able to leave without being quarantined.
So that's right. I didn't think of that, but that's a very good point, because you're talking about going from one country to the next. That's
So it's going to look different, and as you know, spring training teams are playing different teams in their area.
Yes.
Generally in Florida is where I go, or Arizona, where the guys from the West go. But I think there's going to be there may be some games like that from what I'm hearing, but it could be like inter-squad games, and we'll just work it just to kind of get our eye back and shake the rust off. But it's going to be very different.
Different to say the least. And then of course, when you say different, we have to mention, of course, about that there's not going to be fans in the in the stadium, at least not initially, from what we understand. And one of the things that I have read about, and that they're going to try that new rule that they've been exploring in the minor leagues the last couple of years, I believe, or at least the last year, where if a game goes into extra innings, they're going to start with a man on second base.
Yeah.
And I know there's been all this talk the last few years about the pace of play, and this to me crosses the line. To me, it's not baseball. Man on second, I feel bad for the pitchers, because they're going to come in, they're going to automatically inherit a runner in scoring position. To me, that's just not baseball. What are your thoughts on that rule?
Well, funny that you mentioned about the pitchers, because that is the reason that they have even been considering this, because they want to save the pitching staffs. Both teams, if you have a 15, 16, 17 inning game, the thought is that you're really blowing through your pitching staff. And so that, like it or not, that's the thought behind it.
But that's baseball, though. And,
yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Yeah, it also changed the strategy. You probably didn't think about it. So let's say they start, the top of the 10th inning, runner on second base. As a manager, what do? Do you walk the next hitter and have runner on first and second? Because again, assuming that you're going to go back to a traditional game to bunt the runner over, which who knows if that, everyone's looking to hit a home run, so that may not be the case. But do you intentionally walk the next hitter to create a force first and second? And if he does bunt, possibility of getting the force out of third. Yeah. I don't know. Do you?
I guess it'll depend upon the who's up, in the lineup at the time. It'll probably depend on, your bullpen, and then the other rule that's going to tie into this is where the manager, when they bring a relief pitcher in, he has to, I think it's pitch to 3 batters before they can make a change, unless they end the inning, and so that's going to also tie into the strategy that you're talking about. Yeah, you may want to walk the next guy, but then if you have, let's say, a lefty coming up, you got a righty out there, you can't go out there and switch and bring, let's say, one of your lefty specialists in. So managers are going to definitely be a little handcuffed in a way. At least that's what I see. And you talked about the bunt, universal DH, I understand, this time around.
For spring training, it will be, or this season, I believe.
For this,
it will be, yes. Yep.
But for the postseason, the rule with the man on second base, though, is not in effect. They go back to the regular.
That's
from
correct.
what I understand. It's a little hard to keep track of, but we're trying to make sense of it all. But the universal DH, though, to me, kind of throws a monkey wrench into that strategy that you mentioned about the bunting.
Everybody's a power hitter now, and with launch angles and everything else, everybody's swinging for the fences. So, it could be just the opposite of what we just described. It could be runner on second with no outs, and you got 3 guys coming up trying to just hit a home run or just knock them in.
And I guess time will tell. I mean, they voted on it. It's going to be in effect, so we have no choice but to deal with it. We'll see how it plays out, and we'll hope for the best. I mean, what can I say? I mean, we're going to see. And, now, again, 22 years, you've seen a lot, needless to say. You've obviously umpired from every position. And what would you say has been the hardest call to make, from game to game?
I think it's going to sound maybe trivial, but I think the hardest call is the check swing. And that goes for if you're working home plate, or if you're on first or third, where the home plate umpire is going to peel down for some help. And, because, these guys are so strong that, they move that bat and you think that they're going to go, and they're strong enough to hold up. And personally, I find that whenever I get in trouble with a check swing, it's because I call it too quickly. And that holds true for anything. If you timing is the key. So if the difference of a pitch looking like a strike and being in the dirt is literally a fraction of a second, and it's that much time that you have to wait. And the longer that you can wait, the better timing that you have, the more likely that you're going to get it right. We're not going to get everything right.
That's right.
Our goal is to get everything right, but
no, listen, nobody's perfect, but that's part of the beauty of the game also, the human element. I know that we've heard talk about, the robotic umpires or something with the balls and strikes. I don't know all the details about it. You may know more than I do. What are your thoughts on that? And
well, I think that it's going to be interesting if they go to that, and I think someday they probably will. I think that I will be retired at that point, which would be fine. But again, you have to understand, if you have a machine calling balls and strikes, the only thing that the machine is going to do is register a strike anytime any part of the ball goes through any part of the box, the strike zone. And there are many times that we see a breaking ball that clearly goes through the strike zone but lands on the ground, or a sweeping slider that cuts the corner of the strike zone, but the catcher has to lunge for it, and those will be strikes. And it'll be interesting to see how the players react to that.
We'll have to see how it pans out, if it even comes to that point. I know we talked about the pace of play and baseball's management's belief that it has to be picked up and everything, and we all talk about, batters taking too much time in and out of the box, as a factor. One of the things that I feel is a factor is the instant replay. I'll be honest with you, I just don't feel it fits in baseball. That's my thought, and I see nothing to me holds up the games nowadays more than that when that's employed. What are your thoughts on the instant replay since it's been implemented?
When they first implemented instant replay, it was only for boundary calls, and we didn't really know what it was going to be like, and it turned out to be very helpful, especially for the boundary calls, which it started, because most of these ballparks today are so fan friendly that fans can reach over almost in every stadium, and it's very difficult to see from so far away if a fan is reaching over the fence, if he touched the ball. So in that regard, that it was helpful. But everything, to every benefit, there's an opposite effect as well, and I liken it to a medication. Every medication has a side effect, and to me, the side effect to replay, as helpful as it is and can be, the side effect is when the runner hits, the batter hits a double, and he's safe by 3-4 feet, and he's so safe that the umpire makes a very casual safe call, and then all of a sudden you see the manager give you go to the headset, and when that happens, you immediately know that the runner's momentum took him off the bag. When he hit the ground, he might have come off the bag that much for that quick. And slow motion, high def cameras pick that up. And there's no umpire that wants to miss a play, but when he misses a play like that, you say it's just like a replay miss. If it wasn't for instant replay, no one would have even thought about it. But it has changed the game. You think about how the middle infielders, they used to be a swipe tag, and if the ball beat him, he was called out. Now they hold the tag on the runner, hoping that he may come off the base, and even for such a slight, so replay has changed the game.
It definitely has. I feel it takes too long for when there is an instant replay being done, and to me, they talk about the pace of play. Well, to me, that I identify that as one of the issues that I think they could look at. But I guess there's pros and cons to everything, needless to say, and we've got to see how things continue to evolve. Now, again, 22 years, as I keep mentioning, and I want to just I want to ask you, what would you say the greatest game you've umpired in the past 22 years?
Well, working the postseason is always a treat. That's what everybody's working towards. So I would say if I had to pick a game, I would probably have to pick two, and I would say my first game, which was June 4th, 1991 in St. Louis against the Dodgers, and what a thrill to get that call, because that's what everyone is waiting for. And I actually had when I got the call, Randy Marsh, who was on the crew, twisted his ankle, and he was off for a week. And that gave me an opportunity to work, for a week in the big leagues. And my first day that I was called up, I actually had the day off, and I was in the city by myself because the guys all went home, as we do now on an off day.
Yep.
And I just, I remember walking into Busch Stadium, just kind of walking. They let me in, and just walking around in the field, and it's empty stadium, just looking around and saying, tomorrow, I'm going to be here with a full crowd. And I worked first base that day. Joe Torre was the manager of the Cardinals.
I was just going to say, Joe Torre was manager of the Cardinals back then, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that was certainly a big thrill. And then I guess my other biggest thrill was working the plate in Game 1 of the 17 World Series. That was, again, that's what everybody on the field is working towards to get to that World Series. And
the Astros and the Dodgers, of course.
Yes, and it was worth the wait, certainly.
I remember watching that game, watching you behind the plate there, and But when I hear that you're umpiring, I'm like, oh, I want to definitely watch this game. Whether it's the Yankees, whether you're in another town and it happens to be on. I always try to watch you as much as I can. I can't tell you how happy I am for you for the career that you've had, and I look forward to continuing, to watch you behind the plate at first, second, third, etc. And you're an inspiration, Phil, to everybody, and God bless you once again. And speaking of that, in addition to this tremendous career you've had, as an umpire, you've off the field, what you've achieved, of course, with the Robert Longo ALS Fund, 16 years, and started, of course, in memory of the late great Robert Longo, great Belleville athlete, was a very dear friend of yours who passed to that horrific disease, aka Lou Gehrig's disease, and the way it's taken off since, and you started out as a fund for Dominique, his daughter, and everything for college and all that, but what it's evolved into has just been remarkable with the funds you've raised and the families you've helped and everything. Take us through these past 16 years with the Robert Longo ALS Fund and the annual gala at Nonina's, and what the fund has done and where you're looking to go.
Yeah. The last time that I saw Robert alive, I actually went down to Florida with our friend Hank DeFrance.
Yes.
And at that point, he was unable to speak. Lou Gehrig's disease takes away all muscle movement. The only thing that an ALS patient victim will have left is just the movement of their eyes. And that was the first thing that we raised money for, was to try to buy Robert, in fact we did, a computer that he was able to type with his eyes. And it was very primitive back then. Now it's a much different, the technology has grown to the point. But at that time, I said to Robert, the last time I saw him, was that, as you know, Robert was a Harvard graduate. Education was very important to him. He had a 9-year-old daughter, Dominique, at the time. And, I said, Rob, we will raise enough money to send Dominique to whatever college that she wants to go. I don't want you to even think twice about that. We'll get the Belleville community involved, which we did. I'll get the baseball community involved, which we did. And the rest of that story is that Dominique graduated from Harvard a couple of years ago.
That's right.
But what I learned along the way was that, we started out with the idea to raise money for Dominique to go to college, but it started out by buying a computer, and the response was so overwhelming from just Belleville, Belleville friends and family, that I had this leftover money, and I said, what do I do? I really didn't want to be in the fundraising business, and I didn't want people to say, well, gee, you raised X amount of dollars, but it didn't cost you that much. What did you do with the rest of the money? I didn't want to be questioned like that and even have any thought of any suspicion. So I looked into really starting a fund, and what I found out by really becoming legitimate by applying for a 501c3 charity, you cannot just have one person be the beneficiary of that. So we had to open it up, and we had to have a board, and we had to have meetings, and we had to have a mission statement. So our mission statement was really simple. We wanted to be able to provide scholarships to kids whose parent or grandparent was a victim of ALS. We wanted to be able to give money to research for ALS, and we wanted to be able to help patients, whether it's to put a ramp in their house. We've purchased vans for conversion vans for people. I had no idea the first dinner what to expect. And I know I saw Hank's story that you did,
yes,
which was a great job, and they're doing a great job with the Rubber Ducky Foundation. And I heard them say the same thing. We didn't know the first year what was going to happen.
That's right.
And I remember going to our friends at Nanina's and Barry, Joe, and Vito, and saying, how many people could I put in here? And they said, well, listen, we've been doing this a long time, and if you get a couple hundred people, that would be good. And I said, okay, that's great, but how many people could I put in here? Not knowing what to expect. And long story short, the first year we had 500 people, and we thought that we could have a dance floor. We had to have half a dance floor, and then we said we can't have a dance floor. And as you said, we're going into our 17th year, and we have 600 people. So it's really been beyond my expectation about where this thing has really grown.
It's incredible, and again, you're an inspiration with how you have led the involvement of this wonderful organization. I remember being at the first two dinners, and then having missed some in between, and then being there the last couple of years. And you never know who's gonna show up. I mean, from a celebrity standpoint, Doc Gooden's been there the last couple of years. Former heavyweight boxer Jerry Cooney.
Yeah.
Had the pleasure of meeting him. Ed Randall from Talking Baseball, one of my favorite. Steve Sharippa, that's right.
Sopranos and the Blue Bloods.
Absolutely.
Bob Costas has been there.
Oh, Bob, the way you bring all those people together each and every year for such a worthy cause. But when you're doing your presentations and you're presenting, the monies to families, to help them with their home care for their ALS family member, it's so heartwarming, so riveting, to see that this organization has grown to the point where it can do that. And thanks to your leadership and the way you got everybody involved between baseball, between Belleville, etc., it's just been remarkable to see. And I know you have a date for the 2021 dinner.
Yeah, it's the last Thursday of January. We have the date booked, and we're going to have to just wait to see.
We'll have to wait and see.
Because who knows?
Exactly. It's too soon to tell yet.
The virus will dictate what we can do. But I can tell you this, if at that point it gets to be that we could only have 100 people or a couple hundred people, it would be very difficult to turn away 400 or 500 people.
I can imagine.
Most of those people have been there we get people that hear about it through their cousin or their uncle,
yeah.
and they but for the most part, it's the same people every single year.
Yeah.
And when people like a Bob Costas or a Steve Sharippa, or they Robert said to me before he died, and he typed it out with his eyes on the computer, and he said, "Go national." And that's the way Robert always thought, bigger and bigger.
That's right.
And we did involve the National ALS Association in Washington, D.C., and they come every year as well, and we've presented them with checks. And they all walk away saying the same thing. I can't believe that everyone in this room seems like they know everybody else. And I say, you're very close to it. And it's really such a compliment to our community of Belleville. That it's and I include Nutley as well, because it's like sister communities.
That's right.
We were arch rivals as kids growing up, but now but that's probably been the biggest compliment. In addition to helping people, having people come from the outside and saying, "This is like something we've never seen before." How this community comes together.
It's like I said before, it's absolutely remarkable. I look forward to the event each and every year. But thank you for what you have done with this fund, and I look forward to helping you and contribute in any way that I can as it continues to grow and move forward in the coming years.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure. But getting back to the baseball for a second, and I got to ask again, the 22 years, so you're talking over 2 decades, so you've seen a lot of great ball players, a lot of great pitchers. Greatest player you've seen in your time as an umpire?
I think when I first came into the game, Tony Gwynn comes to mind.
Oh.
Just seeing the pure hitter that he was, and
tremendous,
and just such a nice man that he was, and then having the chance to meet his son, who played as well.
That's right.
But I would say and there's been so many great players. when I got into the game, I thought that I would be able to meet Mickey Mantle at an old timers game someday, and of course he died before I really made it.
That's true. Yes.
But there's been so many great players over the years, but Tony Gwynn comes to my mind,
and we lost him way too soon.
Way
too
soon. Yeah.
Definitely one of the greatest hitters in the history of the game, no question about it. Now, what about from a pitching standpoint? What would you say the best pitcher you've seen?
Yeah, there were so many great pitchers. I think of today. I think of Verlander, Kershaw. I think of Roger Clemens when I first came in. It was. People always say, who's the pitcher that you really want to work the plate when he's pitching? And I always say, it's more important who the catcher is. Because, as you mentioned before, the catcher's job is to make every pitch look like a strike.
That's right.
And
it's their job to control the game, essentially.
Yeah. And it's and I was a catcher, and I think that's helped me as an umpire. But the biggest thing that catcher can do for an umpire is give him the ability to see. Some catchers, especially young catchers, they want to stay so far inside. They think that the pitcher or the pitcher coach or the manager wants them to be on the inside corner. And when they do that, they take away the area that we call the slot, which enables us to see the outside part of the plate. So, I think that the catcher is more important to me, as opposed to who the pitcher is.
Interesting. Well, I tell you, that's a very, very good, very good perspective, Phil. And again, I would agree with you, because the catcher, in many ways, is trying to control the game. Phil, again, I want to congratulate you on a tremendous career, and a career that is going to continue on. And we look forward to the remainder of your career. We look forward to more great memories. We look forward to upcoming Robert Longo ALS Fun Dinners. And I would say, if to kind of close it out, how about we each take our caps here and we'll do a little tip to George. How about that?
Sure.
All right. So you got Belleville Bucks represented. You got your umpire, George. Rest in peace, my friend. We love you. Phil, thank you very much.
My pleasure, Anthony. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Have a great night, everybody.